Madam, it's a great honor for me, in name of all my colleague senators, to welcome you in the Senate of Belgium. This is the first time in our Senate that a First Lady will take the floor in this special room of our plenary session. And we are very proud that you are this lady. Indeed, Egypt is a big country, a very important one for the whole area of the Middle East. Around 70 million of inhabitants. Its culture, its history, its people are incredible. Also, its role among the Arab countries is very significant. It has recently shown its determination to end the Middle East conflict by inviting in Sharm el-Sheikh President Mahmoud Abbas and Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. Madam, the struggle you led around the world to preserve and protect women, children and human rights is honourable, and I take this opportunity to congratulate you for your action. The international context, and your presence today is fully part of it, is very suitable for your visit in our Senate. Indeed, in this Senate, we celebrated this week the Women's Day. It's a sort of mistake we do a lot. It's 1 day is 1 week. 1 year, I remember in 1975 it was 1 year for women, and we decided it will be a decade. So we do the same this week. And on the 8th of March, we have celebrated it, but on the 10th of March with you, we will do it again. We are very proud to welcome a person involved like you in women's rights in this context. The celebration of the 10th anniversary of the Declaration of Beijing reminds us lots of actions, struggles and efforts that has been led by women to make their situation go to progress. The Senate of Belgium participated actively to the Assembly in New York last week, and I'm very proud to greet here the members of the delegation, and they were numerous and they were able to follow all the activities of this special assembly in New York, and I will also thank all my colleagues that have taken on their time to go to New York, be active there and be proud of their country and the work we are doing also for women. Within the framework of our international competence as Senate, this is fundamental for us and for all Belgium too, because a senatorial delegation shown the importance that Belgium as a country, and not only a government, but the whole parliamentary life gives to this issue. Just like you do, because you participate as a strong actor to the evolution of women's rights. You play a great role within the framework of children's rights and health. Since 1977, you are the founder and the chairperson of the Integrated Care Society, an organisation with the main objective of providing social, cultural and health care to school children. You notably founded the National History Museum for Children in Egypt, and also your action amongst national law for ameliorating the situation of children is very relevant and permitted to Egyptian children to life in better conditions and in prosperity. One of the most important actions in the world within the framework of rights is clearly your Women's Foundation for International Peace. And this is also maybe the most important reason why we want to share with you a moment of debate in this Senate, because you have taken this role that only you, as the First Lady of Egypt, could take to try to speak about women and peace in maybe one of the most bulversed areas of the world. I recently had the opportunity to meet you in Geneva for the Conference of Women Defending Peace. Seeing this context, I have the same conviction as you, and I share it with a lot of senators, that women can play an important or even crucial role in the matter of resolution of conflicts. Indeed, women are also the first victims of war. War kills their husbands, their sons, makes them living in precarious situations, and we know about rape and what is happening in maybe the African country we know the best in terms of collective rapes in situations of war is something that is so awful in our century. Without the voice of these women, we could not reach a concrete or prosperous result. I take this opportunity to give a special address also to Mrs. Aleya Al-Bendari, because she is also part of the success of what we have done in Geneva and what the whole staff of your foundation is achieving, going also when we go to the Palestinian election, to be able to push in the right direction, to have women involved also in this very difficult group that has to go to peace in this area. I thank you, Madam, in the name of the Senate. Thank you for the struggle for women and for children. Thank you for your determination and your will to create a better world for all of us. And thank you for having given us the privilege to accept your invitation. I thank you, and I will give you the floor.
Your Excellency, Madam President, honourable members of the Senate, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to be here today in Brussels, the capital of Europe, addressing you in this great institution. I highly appreciate this opportunity to share with you the courses of action taken in response to some of the priority needs and concerns of our people. Egypt, with all its problems, for indeed we have many, and with all its successes, however small or big, all add up to what makes it very special. Its people, its rich culture, both contemporary and from the past, which it has preserved over years and indeed over the millennia. Some of you may have had the opportunity to visit Egypt and experience firsthand Cairo's notorious traffic, but also its very distinctive landscape. Whether the special beauty of its sands and sea, its desert, where you somehow feel that you are closer to the heavens and the stars, its oasis and the journey on the Nile that allow you to enter a different world, far removed from the hardships faced by the pressures and demands made on us by our world today, demands that none of us can escape. Let me in turn take you through the path I have travelled, which has led me to the present level of thinking and action. Early on, my work as a social scientist enabled me to come close to the problems faced by local communities and appreciate the coping mechanisms they used. I saw how women and girls were particularly vulnerable. Every minute of these women's lives was taken up with chores that seemed never-ending. By the end of the day, they neither had the energy nor the peace of mind to take advantage of the services available, however limited they were. I also came to realize their resilience, their capacity to keep going, often enduring all without complaint, and better still, possessing an incredible sense of humor, a characteristic well known of all Egyptians. These early experiences were extremely humbling for me and left images I would carry with me for the rest of my life. I was convinced that while much could be done to alleviate the plight of the poor by effectively addressing their urgent needs, more attention had to be given to enable individuals to be instruments of their own empowerment. In this sense, they would work to improve their lives with dignity and self-respect and not as objects of charity. For ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, development starts with people and must be for people. And the process of growth is not only about commodities, markets, and products. It is also about the fulfillment of human needs, addressing access to education, housing, credit, safe water, and health services, and the progressive development of an infrastructure that greatly facilitates people's daily lives. In our society, like in others, education and health were, and still are, two of the most powerful nation-building blocks. And with a young population like ours, where 38% are under 15 years of age, and those over 65 represent only 3%, enhancing access to education and health services was crucial in laying the foundation for a broader and more comprehensive development strategy. First, we provided education for all, tailored to cover the different needs of our children and youth. Second, we improved the quality of education through various means, from single classroom schools to state-of-art technology centers, from school and neighborhood libraries to the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, from vocational training institutes to the Cairo branch of the Sorbonne University. Our youth are exploring further and further the boundaries of knowledge as they join the world community. Third, we reduced the gender gap to enhance the positive relationship between education of girls and the well-being of families and communities. Experimentation with new types of schools was necessary for making them particularly compatible with rural customs and traditions, and therefore more accommodating to girls' attendance. However, we also realized that a focused approach on social sector programs, although necessary, was not sufficient. It was essential to also invest in economic growth by adopting a holistic approach to development. This would ensure the sustainability of our efforts and the creation of the necessary synergy required for the improvement of the quality of life of the most deprived sectors of society. The government therefore embarked on major investments in both social services and infrastructure development, especially in the rural and peri-urban areas. Maybe people here in Brussels might take this as a matter of common day achievement, but just to give you a few examples, in 1975, only 55% of households had electricity. It reached 97% in 2004. For schools and clinics, the rate went from 57% to almost 100%. Whereas in the past, telephone lines were only available at central points in rural areas, today it's not uncommon to find a farmer with a mobile phone in the midst of his fields. Similar progress was made to increase access to potable water, sanitation, and road network. These basic services enabled households, health centers, hospitals, and schools to function more efficiently. Today, as we reap the benefits of this multifaceted approach, we can look back with pride at the decisions we made. Although the pace of progress in achieving the various goals was uneven, fast and sustained in some areas, and slower in others, an upward trend was noted. all quality of life indicators have shown improvement, be it life expectancy, infant mortality rates, literacy rates, or per capita income. I feel particularly gratified to find that the gender gap has been dramatically reduced. And when I'm talking about gender gap, we were concentrating on the first level of the education ladder, but today we are proud to declare that the graduates of the Egyptian university today in Egypt are 50% girls and 50% boys. A better educated workforce naturally demanded the expansion of employment opportunities. And until the early 90s, the government was still considered the sole employer. However, this paradigm shifted with economic restructuring and the growth of the private sector. During the period 1990-1999, an overall improvement in macroeconomic indicators was witnessed, with a significant increase recorded in the period 1995-2001. Expansion was especially noted in areas such as tourism, finance, and insurance, which attracted many of the younger generation. This advancement was not the outcome of government policies alone, but also reflected a gradual change in people's perception of their roles and responsibilities in nation building. It was not long ago that we looked to the government to fulfill almost all our needs. We became accustomed to having decisions made for us, and by extension, blaming others for any shortcomings. As years went by, we came to realize that this approach had a crippling effect on creativity and on encouraging self-reliance. A major shift in the mindset of people had to be achieved. People had to reclaim their share of responsibility in contributing to the dynamic development of their society and to envisage this process as an interactive one of giving and receiving. We knew that only when people became genuinely active participants, when recipients became real stakeholders, and when we directed our attention towards new constructive avenues, would we experience fundamental change in our society. The fermentation of this movement has been underway for decades, and its exciting energy is increasingly palpable. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no single formula on how individuals and communities should proceed with development, democracy, or globalization strategies. We know that even when there is a certain consensus across continents, the steps communities are likely to take will differ if they aim at a smooth transition, depending on a realistic assessment of their own risks and gains. There is no one-size-fits-all approach in democratization and reform. For us, democracy means the reinforcement of social protection, the enhancement of skills and capabilities, enabling both men and women to exercise greater control over their own destinies, and the desire of people to reaffirm the basic ethical values upon which our cultural heritage is based, namely tolerance and diversity. Today, Egypt has turned a new page in its history. Less than 2 weeks ago, President Mubarak requested the amendment of the Constitution to allow for a contested multi-candidate presidential election. This momentous political move came as a culmination of relentless efforts exerted over the past years to allow for an enabling environment whereby the nation can now make a quantum leap in its march towards further democratization. It was close to 2 decades ago that the process of reform in Egypt was initiated on solid basis. A cumulative course of action was triggered with a clear sight of the ultimate objective. It started with due government restructuring, followed by a confident process of decentralization, and then concerted efforts to strengthen local governorates and councils. Meanwhile, it was always clear to us that development and democracy would only be attained if societies made the best use of all its human resources, men and women. And in this context, and in appreciation of how each society is enriched by the participation of women in the decision-making process, that Egypt marshaled all its energies to address the empowerment of women. A national strategy was formulated. It outlines major efforts for enhancing the social and political participation of women so as to ensure a representation that reflects women's weight in society. And although a woman at present holds the position of Deputy Speaker of the First House of Parliament in Egypt, and 2 parliamentary committees are chaired by women, women's representation is still minimal. It is only 2.9% of the total number of deputies of the First House and 5.7% of the Second House, the Shura Council. The government, however, is currently drafting a new election law that we hope will include remedial measures to ensure a wider participation of women. A National Council for Women was established in the year 2000, and it is working hard to unleash women's potential by working systematically in removing some of the constraints and obstacles women face. For example, through its Centre for Political Training, the Council is upgrading women's political skills, thus creating a pool of potential candidates that can run for the 2005 parliamentary elections. The Council is also coordinating its activities with all political parties to ensure that they too are committed to bringing women to decision-making posts within their own party machinery. Voters' sensitization programs focusing on women are also being implemented as part of this national strategy. Fostering a supportive environment was a principal means of taking bold steps to ensure the equality, equity, and enhancement of women's status in Egypt. The Council is also working together with various entities of the government, the private sector, and non-governmental organizations to facilitate women's access to finance and to help them start microcredit and small enterprises. A recent bill was passed supporting small and medium enterprises as a measure to combat unemployment, especially among women. Training programs are also being implemented to support female-headed households and to help women acquire skills to start their own small businesses. These include 2 very successful projects, Business Online and e-marketing. Several important laws were recently passed, all of which dealt with enhancing the dignity and self-respect of Egyptian women. Just to mention a few, the much-awaited reform of the divorce law, making it more equitable by granting women the right to repudiate a marriage, the nationality law, giving women married to expatriates the right to pass on their Egyptian nationality to their children. This was granted before only to men. A new law on the marriage contract was also enacted that awarded women the right to include substantive conditions within their marriage contracts. And the legislative reforms that also encompass the introduction of the first specialized court in the Egyptian judicial system, the family court, devoted to family law issues. This was accompanied by a new family insurance scheme providing a safety net in case of alimony defaulting husbands. In 2003, the first woman judge was appointed to the Supreme Constitutional Court. A national debate is currently taking place to allow the appointment of women judges in the newly established family courts. A national campaign helping and facilitating the issuance of electoral cards for women all over the country is being launched. And I can cite many more examples, but I won't overburden you today with all these. But I would just like to stress that all these measures took time, effort, and the necessary negotiating skills to quietly but effectively introduce these reforms. Many of the above achievements came as a result of a comprehensive national debate in which all segments of the society were represented. And this was by all means a true process of democracy. Attending to all these priority issues not only reduced injustices, but it has greatly contributed to a process of confidence building and self-worth in women themselves. Our challenge, however, will continue to be the strengthening of our internal forces to defend the democratic processes that are underway in our country. There is no doubt that much more needs to be done and will be done as we make use of new opportunities and the mutual sharing of experiences and information with other groups worldwide. We also realize that our responsibilities do not end at our borders. They transcend boundaries as we become an integral part of the global community. Being global neighbours means new ways of perceiving and appreciating each other, seeing with new eyes, understanding with new minds, and turning our energy to new ways of living with dignity and self-respect. It is this vision that led me to found an international peace movement that works towards enhancing a sense of common responsibility for peace. Much of the movement's ideals stem from our conviction that women's enormous potential can energize peace processes. Together, we can alter the course of events by our tenacity, perseverance, and commitment to creating conditions that foster sustainable peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, for the casual visitor, it is difficult sometimes to discern the total transformation which Egypt has undergone. Sometimes, even for some of us living in Egypt, as is so common in many countries, one tends to forget how the country has evolved and the benefits accrued. Others are unaware of how global conditions have affected all countries, Egypt being no exception. In a rapidly changing world, globalization confronts all of us with enormous risks and opportunities. It is therefore up to us to explore ways and means by which globalization can be shaped to serve the purpose of a more people-friendly and environmentally sustainable world. This will require us to work together in solidarity to limit its negative effects while maximizing its benefits. It is only then that we can build a globalized world with a human face, based on universally shared values, respect for human rights, and human dignity. A world that is inclusive and fair, adhering to democratic principles in its governance and ensuring tangible benefits for all peoples and countries. As someone who has seen the world change around me, I have come to realize that we all stand to gain if we uphold the principles of justice, equity, and peace as essential human values. We must build equal partnerships, and I underline equal partnerships, and appreciate each other's cultural, historical, and spiritual dimensions. For the diversity that men and women from all parts of the world bring may well become a source of enrichment and a challenge to global governance. Ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate International Women's Day, we must applaud the giant steps taken by women worldwide in harnessing their potential and in making the protection of human dignity their common mission. We must congratulate all those women who have left imprints wherever they were, for they have shared no efforts in supporting the struggle for a more just and equitable world for every child, woman, and man. I cannot end without thanking the President of the Senate, my friend, Madame Anne-Marie Lizin, for inviting me to address this August forum, the Belgian Senate. It is an honor for me. I have always admired her courage, leadership, and her staunch defense of human rights, human dignity, whether these affect women, children, or those denied the opportunity for living a decent life. Her tireless efforts in joining hands with so many groups throughout the world have been a source of inspiration to many. Thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you all for giving me this wonderful opportunity of sharing with you some of my thoughts, my vision, and a few of my lived experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam, for this speech and these very friendly words. We will now open a debate with our members, and I ask those who are here maybe to take the floor for questions. Who? Oh, you may stay there.
Okay.
I think it's the best. Mrs. de Bethune, the leader of the Christian Democrat group.
Dank u, voorzitter. I will speak Flemish, madam. Maybe
you need maybe some translation. Oh, this no. Then I'm sorry.
Otherwise
I have to change, Mrs. Mubarak. Yes. I think the best to have the translation is to go there.
No, but otherwise I can.
Oh, the best is to go to the seat. Le mieux c'est d'aller au siège. Alors dans ce cas-là, oui. Mrs. Mubarak, the best for the translation is that you could answer from your seat.
No problem.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, madam. Ik wou u, excellentie, in de eerste plaats zou ik u bedanken om aanvaard te hebben om een spreekbeurt te houden voor de Belgische Senaat en ons te spreken over uw ervaring en uw visie over mensenrechten, vrouwenrechten en kinderrechten. En ik zou willen zeggen in welke mate wij ook onder de indruk zijn van het buitengewone werk dat u op dit vlak hebt gerealiseerd en de jarenlange ervaring die u op dit vlak hebt opgebouwd. En ik denk dat u ook voor een stuk spreekt namens heel veel vrouwen in Egypte en ook daarvoor wil ik u danken. Ik zou heel veel vragen kunnen stellen, maar ik zal mij beperken tot 1 vraag in de eerste ronde. U bent ook voorzitter van een organisatie die opkomt voor de plaats van vrouwen in de vredesprocessen. De actieve rol van vrouwen in de vrede. Nu, wij hebben ook dit punt heel recent op de agenda gebracht in de Belgische Senaat. We hebben hier 2-3 weken geleden een resolutie gestemd die aandringt op de implementatie van een resolutie van de Veiligheidsraad om vrouwen veel actiever te betrekken bij het vredesproces. En het was voorzitter ook een hoofdpunt in New York bij de VN-vrouwenconferentie. En ik had aan haar excellentie willen vragen hoe zij dit concreet ziet vanuit haar ervaring in de Stichting Vrouwen voor Vrede. Hoe kunnen wij erop aansturen dat vrouwen beter betrokken worden bij de vredesprocessen? Vrouwengroepen hier in Vlaanderen, politica hier in Vlaanderen, ambtenaren in Vlaanderen. Wat verwachten de vrouwen in Egypte van de vrouwen in België of in Europa om tot het vredesproces bij te dragen? Hoe kunnen we beter samenwerken voor de vrede? Kan u ons een aantal concrete hints geven en hoe wij dat hier vanuit België ook beleidsmatig kunnen ondersteunen?
Mevrouw de Bethune, do you want to answer to each question? Okay, so I give you the floor.
Thank you. First, I would just like to admit that working or establishing an organization or working in an organization that deals with women security and peace issues, for me was a completely new experience. I have no experience in this field at all. And after attending several of meetings, in the year 2000, I'll just go back a little history back. In the year 2000, we had, and maybe this is not known very much here in Europe, we had the first Arab Women's Summit held in Egypt, where first ladies and princesses or queens, whatever their position was, came to Egypt to discuss the role of Arab women and what we could do to better improve our conditions and work together. And after 2 years of working and holding almost 3 Arab Women's Summits, we came to the conclusion that we needed an institution. We needed to have some kind of status that would help us work together on all issues related to women in particular. One of the results of our meeting was to hold different panels and different discussions in every Arab country talking about different issues. We held these discussions. We talked about women in politics. We talked about education of women. We talked about women in the media. We talked about women and in conflict areas. And this was held, strangely enough, in Beirut 2 years ago. In that particular conference, we as Arab women came to realize that very few of us women were involved in any, I won't even say at that time, we were not even thinking about peace negotiating tables or being part of the negotiating process. This was far beyond our way of thinking. We were not aware that there was a resolution at that particular time that was already the 1325. So personally, by reading into the Security Council resolution, by listening to all the Arab women, by contacting many of our friends in different parts of the world, I came to realize that we needed, again, an institution emanating from our region to tell the rest of the world that we as Arab women are also interested in peace. We have paid our share of wars. We have paid our share, and we still are paying, unfortunately. But we came to realize that we as Arab women together, we needed to have some kind of means to support our work. And this is how initially the idea of the movement came into being. The first thing we did was to have an Arab regional meeting where 22 Arab representatives from the Arab world attended. And in that first meeting, we all realized none of us knew the existence of 1325. We were completely unaware. Which brings us to the point that there is no point in having resolutions passed at the United Nations if it does not reach what we say that we are I always consider myself as part of the grassroots, because all my work is with the grassroots. I'm working all through NGOs. I'm not part of the presidency or government per se. I'm working on the grassroots. So we came to realize that none of us knew of its existence. And this was a legal framework giving women the right to speak out, giving women the right to say we have a right to be part of the negotiation process, we have a right to be on the agenda of peace issues. So it was a very important point that we made at that time, that part of our movement would be to educate people in our region first about this legal framework that exists and other legal framework that exists that will help us implement our program. So we held this workshop. Now I'm talking on a very personal level, as I became more involved, as I read more, as I contacted more people, as I met such wonderful people like the President of the Senate here, I came to realize that we in the Arab world and in Egypt need to collaborate and work with other non-governmental organizations, with other women's movements that exist all over the world. And I discovered there are hundreds, maybe thousands of groups out there in the world that have the same mandate, that want to work for peace, that want to collaborate, to network, to get together, to be a force, to speak out. And as we have in our mandate, to make those silent voices heard. There are so many women on the ground in conflict areas that are doing wonderful work for defending peace, for building peace. After their lives have been shattered, after their communities, it is the women who pick up the pieces. It is the women who rebuild. And this is why I think we all, whether from my part of the world or from any part of the world, we feel that women should have this right, should be given the opportunity to participate and to be part of the peace-making process. Thank you.
I will give the floor to Mrs. Laloy, Madame Laloy, pour le groupe socialiste.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Madame, je voudrais également m'associer à ma collègue pour vous remercier d'avoir accepté l'invitation de notre Présidente, Madame Lisa, et de venir nous parler de votre combat et des actions que vous menez sur le terrain, comme vous le dites bien. Et c'est très souvent là le champ privilégié de l'action féminine, c'est d'être sur le terrain partout et toujours. Je voudrais deux points qui me tiennent particulièrement à cœur dans les combats que mènent les femmes. Au-delà de mon travail de parlementaire, je suis aussi responsable d'un mouvement féminin et nous avons beaucoup travaillé sur la problématique de la santé et particulièrement ce que nous appelons maintenant la santé reproductive. C'était d'ailleurs un des thèmes importants de la conférence, de la session qui s'est tenue à New York la semaine dernière. Je voudrais vous demander dans quelle mesure, quelle collaboration nous pourrions avoir avec vous dans ce domaine. Quel est l'état de la question en Égypte? J'ai eu l'occasion de m'entretenir à New York la semaine dernière avec votre représentante politique qui est venue faire un exposé et qui a d'ailleurs brillamment présenté votre association. Et nous avons échangé quelques mots autour de ce problème. Qu'en est-il au plan du planning familial? Est-ce que c'est un secteur qui est développé? Dans quelle mesure ne pourrions-nous collaborer avec vous pour faire avancer ce problème de la santé reproductive? Un autre point concerne les violences faites aux femmes. Nous travaillons ici au Sénat avec ma collègue Jeannine Leduc à une problématique qui relève de l'accompagnement des femmes qui ont été l'objet de viols. Et donc, je serais aussi heureuse de vous entendre sur la question. Est-ce que vous avez des expériences en la matière? Est-ce que nous pourrions aussi, sur ce terrain, collaborer avec vous? Je vous remercie déjà.
I give you again the floor, Mrs.
Thank
Mubarak.
you. With the reproductive health, I think that that Egypt's mandate was very clear as far back as the Cairo conference, population conference held in Cairo, and it continues to be. We have not changed any of our ideas on that. We have been working in Egypt, and we have a national program. We have a council, the Council for Childhood and Motherhood, established way back in the late 1980s. That is responsible for many programs related to reproductive health. We have a program on safe motherhood. We have a program on family planning. We have to work a lot on family planning because we have such a large population and we are increasing so rapidly. So we are doing tremendous effort in trying to have these family planning programs implemented. Of course, because of family planning, and it's a very critical issue, as we all know in many countries, we are educating the young girls, we are educating the young mothers of the importance of spacing the children, of the importance of having a smaller family, so that they will be able to better health for the mother, better health for children, and a smaller family is a healthier and a better family. So these are the major points in the reproductive health. We have started now, again, education on reproductive health in schools. This has been a very sensitive issue. It still is. We do not openly discuss such things. It is not part of the school curriculum directly per se, sexual education, health education. It's because of our customs and traditions. We have to be very careful how we do it. But we have now started introducing in the curriculum, within the science curriculum and within the biology and the anatomy, and it started to infiltrate now of the importance of having such programs. Regarding violence against women, well, as we know, it covers different aspects. It covers violence in the home, it covers violence in the communities, it covers violence in war and in conflict areas, and it comes to the question of rape. In Egypt, again, if we're talking about violence against women in the homes, this is not very broadly spoken about. Again, customs and traditions don't permit, in a way, women to come out and say, well, I have been beaten by my husband or I've been battered by my husband. They tend to keep it within. But in the National Council for Women, we have just opened, almost a year ago, an ombudsman. And we are now receiving a hotline. We have a telephone which comes out on the television that there is this line: if any woman is in trouble, facing violence at home or in the community, or has any court case that she's not able to proceed, let us know. So we are now starting, in a sense, to get a feeling of the magnitude of especially violence in the homes, because we never had that kind of survey before. We never had women coming out and telling us they had a problem. So through the ombudsman, through this hotline, we have just now starting to accumulate our data, and we hope by the end of maybe the middle of this year, we will be able to have some kind of data as to how big is it a problem. Regarding, of course, women in conflict as in rape, it's through our movement, of course. We hope to work through the coalition. This is one of the major mandates, is how can we protect women and children during armed conflict, and what can we do to prevent trafficking and rape. Something that took place in Egypt also a few years ago, we had a system that if a young girl was raped in Egypt and the raper was caught, he had a way of evincing the law by saying, okay, I made a mistake, I'll marry the girl. And that was how it was done. And he'd say, I'll marry her, and he got away with it. Now this law was changed. And we fought for it, we lobbied for it. Again, this was a national debate, it took quite, but now it's finished. If a raper is caught, then he goes to prison, he has his sentence. There's no such thing as getting away by just saying, I will marry the girl. So if that answers your question. Thank you.
So Mrs. Laloy and Mrs. Leduc are trying also to have in this country a DNA bank for this sort of crimes. But this is maybe a step we can do as a Senaat.
A little bit step higher than where we are at the moment.
I'll give the floor now to our President of the Foreign Relations Commission, Monsieur Roulans de Vivier. Je vais passer la parole.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I listened with great attention to what Mrs. Mubarak has said. I must say that I have been many times in Egypt, and the situation of the women in the country is worrying.
Is worrying?
Is worrying.
Worrying.
I think that the divorce law, for instance, which was presented by Mrs. Mubarak, is a real problem. So when you go there and when you see the real situation of women in the countryside, and I would say especially in High Egypt, there is a world of difference between what could be expected and expected by Mrs. Mubarak's speech and the reality on the field. So the question is maybe not so much about what should be achieved at a certain time, but the different steps that should be taken to approach this goal. So what can we expect from the outside world as a rapid change of the situation of the woman in Egypt?
I don't fully agree with you, sir, that the divorce law is a problem. I mean, just a few years ago, no woman in Egypt could really file for a divorce. She could not get a divorce. Eventually, she could if there were if the husband eventually gives in and says, okay, I'll give you a divorce. But we have known women, and it is recorded, that women have 10, 15 years trying to get a divorce, and the husband would just not give her a divorce, and there was no other way that she could do it. Now, with the personal status law being amended in the year 2000 to facilitate divorce procedures for women, this is known as the Khula law. It is not completely in the sense that it grants the woman, as I said, for the first time, the right to get a divorce, even if she cannot prove that she has been subjected to harm. Before they said, if you've been subjected to physical harm or been subjected, you can file for a divorce. But now all the woman has to do is to go and say, I can no longer live with this man, I cannot tolerate living with him, I want a divorce. So what she is entitled to do, she has to give back, in essence, what the husband gave her during marriage. You know, if you gave her a piece of land in her name, then she's okay, you take your land back. If you gave her something, a commodity, you take, and then she has it. And we have thousands of cases now who have had this divorce because of the Khula law. So I don't know why you say it's not good. It has. Maybe, as you say, in rural areas where tradition is still strong, maybe women don't know about the Khula law. Maybe they don't know how to go and sue for this divorce. And this takes place in countries where women don't know their legal rights. But this is what the National Council of Women is doing. We are taking it upon our responsibility to educate women, especially women in Upper Egypt, especially women in the villages, about their legal rights, their political rights, and their social rights. There's no point in having laws if women don't know, like we're just talking about the Resolution 1325. It exists, nobody knows about it, so nobody applies it. The same applies to any law. If women don't know there is this legal security there that they can go and get, then they won't use it. I agree, I mentioned in my speech, we have a gap. We had a gap in education between urban and rural, between boys and girls. We are working very much to narrow this gap. I don't know if you have been recently to Upper Egypt to visit the government of Kena. In Kena, in Enna, have you been there? In Upper Egypt? Yeah. Well, this is where tremendous change is taking place because the Egyptian government is now focusing on Upper Egypt, which is, in case people don't know here, always poorer and more backward than the Nile Valley region. And a lot of work is being done there on all aspects, and I think the government is putting in both financial and human resources to upgrade. I hope I did not, in my speech, say that everything, all our problems are solved and that we have reached the maximum of what we want to do, or that Egyptian women have all their rights and have complete equality and equity and all these lovely concepts we talk about. I hope I did not convey that message. I said we have a process, we have achieved, and we are going to achieve more, and we are working and aiming at bettering and improving the quality of lives of all Egyptians, men, women, and children.
Thank you, Mrs. Mubarak. I give the floor to Mrs. Fawzia Talawi. She is one of our elected senators who are directly linked to the Muslim community in our country.
Thank you, Mrs. President. Thank you, Your Excellency. I fully join, of course, my colleagues in their gratitude towards you for being here among us. And thank you very much for your interesting speech where we have learned a lot about it. Excellency, you mentioned earlier ago that we are living in an era of globalization. And globalization means also the raising, certainly in the Arabo-Islamic world, of fundamentalism. And we know that certain groups, although they call them fundamentalist or Islamist groups, form an impediment towards women's rights, the realization of those women's rights. I fully followed the debate in Morocco about a new family law. And we have seen there that the parliament, supported by the king, stood a modern interpretation of Sharia law in the context of equality of men and women in family matters. We've seen also that the raising of fundamentalism leads to putting females into a more traditional role, although that the world is changing, not only in the West, but also in that part of the world, in giving women more leading roles. And as we all know that you have also the Al-Azhar University on your territory, we as Muslim women here in the West expect also a lot of that university, of those religious scholars, to helping us in interpreting just so that Sharia law in granting more women's rights. Maybe you can give me an answer upon that. How do you compete in Egypt? Because we know that Egypt among all those other countries, are not spared of fundamentalist groups, so you must have been thinking about it. And my second question is also about women's rights and a certain violation of women's rights. I remember when I was 14 years old, I read a book, it was obligatory in our school, of Nawal Saadawi about genital mutilation of young girls. Here in the West we have still echoes that in some parts of Egypt, but in other countries too, that traditional practice is still practiced. And the misunderstanding here in the West is that a lot of people believe that genital mutilation is linked on Islamic interpretation, and we try to say the other argument, but we don't succeed always. And that's another question I wanted to ask you, if you want to answer upon it, of course. Thank you.
Two very difficult questions. Yes. I'll start with the second because it's fresh in my mind. What we refer to as FGM, the female genital mutilation. Yes, in Egypt it has been practiced for centuries. I think it is either a pharaonic or coming from the Sudanese, from the Nubian, Sudan. It has nothing to do with Islam. And the proof is that very few Islamic countries practice this. Very few Islamic countries. In North Africa, I think Egypt is among the few. And this is because it is coming to us from the south. And through the National Council for Childhood and Motherhood, in 1998, we have started a national campaign. We're educating, we're going down to the smallest villages in Egypt. We're educating the mothers and the grandmothers, because they are the ones that carry this tradition. And we're explaining to them, from the medical point of view, the seriousness of this procedure, from the psychological point of view, the traumatic effect it has on the child. And I'm very proud to declare today that already the statistics in Egypt are showing that this practice has declined tremendously. And we're working through the council with the religious leaders, with the local leaders, through the schools, through the hospitals, through the clinics, through the nurses, at spreading this message. We have wonderful spots on television now, educating especially the rural families against this practice. And there's a law. The Minister of Health has just issued a law to legally forbid such a procedure. So it has been lobbied, talked about, discussed, and we are moving towards this. And I hope soon we can declare that Egypt is free of this practice. Regarding, of course, fundamentalism, this is a very critical issue, and then we go into to Islam and what. I mean, Islam is not a fundamental. I don't want to stay here now and be put on the defensive to defend my religion or to defend Islam. I think people who want to know about Islam have to read more about it to understand. But I just want to say it is a peaceful religion. It is had nothing to do with fundamentalism, and it is a misfortune that groups of fundamentalism are coming out in different parts of the Islamic world, distorting the image of religion that has survived for so many thousands of years as a peaceful religion, as a tolerant religion. Dealing with these fundamental groups, every country now, I think not just the Arab world, but even in Western countries, have to deal with it.
And also Belgium.
Yeah. It is a matter of education of our young people. I think the young generations have to be properly equipped with the necessary skills and the kind of education for them to be able to differentiate what is right, what is wrong, what is fundamental, what is true Islam, what it's all about. But like any other country, Egypt is working with these groups, as I said, through education, through maybe sometimes we make the excuse, we say, well, because they come out of maybe poor families, because they feel they are marginalized, because they're unemployed. But you'd be surprised when you look at some of these groups, they are not uneducated, they are people who have had some of them, in university education, they are educated, they're from middle class. So it's nothing to do so much with poverty and being marginalized as being maybe it's because of the jobs, unemployment. So the more we get these kind of people as part of the process of development, the more we include them in a process, the more they feel they are part of, hopefully, more moderate groups. This is the only way we can, sort of overcome such trends.
Thank you, Madam. Last question, very short one for Mrs. Sichen. It's the last one I have on my list.
Oui, Madame, merci beaucoup pour toutes ces informations que vous nous donnez, mais je voudrais vous poser une question qui porte particulièrement sur les enfants, et en particulier sur les enfants de la rue et la pauvreté, qui sont quand même une question assez fondamentale, puisqu'elle nous permet normalement d'imaginer l'avenir de nos pays. En ce qui concerne les enfants de la rue dans votre pays, est-ce que vous avez un travail spécifique qui se fait, sachant que dans d'autres pays, ils sont souvent mis sous la coupe des écoles coraniques qui leur permettent à la fois de pouvoir avoir un gîte et aussi de la nourriture? Et est-ce que, par rapport à cela, vous pensez qu'on pourrait imaginer un système qui serait moins lié à la religion, mais qui leur permettrait une scolarisation? Merci.
Regarding children in general, and we refer to these children as children with special needs. And through the National Council for Child and Women in Egypt, we have been working with different kinds of children with special needs. Handicapped children, of course, being one, street children the second, and child labor. Children who are forced to go out to work or who are actually working, especially in the most, as we say, the worst kind of labor possible, and we have even restricted that completely for children. Yes, we have a strategy for street children in Egypt, and through the National Council for Childhood and Motherhood, we are working. We have documented to a large extent. We have traced the causes and reasons for having children on the street. And of course, we have come to the conclusion that 90% of it comes because of broken families, because of poor families who can't afford to look after their children, and they let them go in the street. We have a program now, we call these sheltered homes, where again, it's non-governmental organizations working with the council and some of the Ministry of Health, Minister of Education, and the local governors. We collect these children from the street. We take them to this one day. They spend the whole day in this shelter. They're given a bath. They're given food. They're given some kind of education. And then the first thing we do is contact the families. We go to the family and we have like a family counseling session. We talk to the family. We see, well, why are your children on the street? And we have found out that broken families, where women are responsible for looking after 4 or 5 children on her own. Her husband has just left her on her own, and she has no means of income. So it's poverty and it's broken families. What we are doing now, if families or families take their children back home, we are paying the families an incentive, to look after it, not us. It's not enough for us to give the child a meal and a place to spend the day, and then at night he's back on the street. This, I don't think, is the right approach. But we're doing this at the moment until we get the families on board and until we make the children feel more secure, because some children want to stay on the street. They don't want to go back to their homes. So we're trying to link again, to get this familial bond to strengthen it again, and we have succeeded in quite a number of hundreds of cases so far, especially working in Alexandria and Cairo and Giza, 3 major governorates. So it is a program and a problem we are looking into very seriously.
Thank you, Mrs. President. I want to thank you in the name of the Senaat for your presence, for your fantastic speech, but also for this working session, which is very, very hard to do. And you do it in a way that shows that you manage your country. And we are very proud to have such a courageous woman in this very particular and important country for the whole Africa, but also for the Middle East. We hope you a good future and for peace also for your country.
Thank you.